Welcome, friends and feeds, to a special episode of Cult and Classic Films podcast. I'm going to bring you classic mini-sodes. We used to run mini-sodes occasionally, and they were usually things like movie reviews or product reviews that weirdos like us find interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and play these for you. Enjoy.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to another episode of Cult and Classic, rather a mini-sode. These are the short episodes we bring you every Friday in between our main episodes, which launch every Tuesday, where we talk about two films, one mainstream and one cult, that are thematically related. I'm excited for this one because oftentimes, as you listeners have probably noticed, our mini-sodes are just me. But today we have our full panel here to talk about this awesome subject, which is comic characters who need a reboot. We're talking about on film or television, characters who've already been portrayed at some point in time, but are in dire need of re-envisioning or relaunching in some form. I am, as always, your host, Nate Wyckoff, comedian and film critic for horrornews.net. With us, we have Tad Mastroianni. How are you doing, Tad?
Yo, ho, ho.
Ho, 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 and a bottle of yo. Jeffrey Tucker, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
That was uncomfortably normal for you. And rounding out our fantastic cast, we have Amanda Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I'm wonderful today. Thank you, Nate.
Excellent, excellent. So it's interesting because oftentimes we don't have a full panel here for these Friday episodes because I'm either interviewing a special guest and I don't want to inundate them with more than one person chucking questions at them, or because
you just don't want us weirdos, interacting with the normies.
The normies. It's true. It's true. I was just trying to be classy about it. But what's different about this one and why we have a whole panel is because sometimes, listeners, as a podcast runner, you have to juggle many different tasks. And when you juggle things, if you're like me and have bad hand-eye coordination, you drop them. Now, I, in this case, dropped loading the proper screener film, which is how we view the films for our discussions. So we couldn't do what we were going to do today, but luckily we're always prepared for being unprepared. That's why we're talking about comic characters who need a reboot. So to start off this discussion, I'm going to jump to Jeff. Jeff, first character that pops into your head that you think needs a reboot. Who is it?
I need a slight preamble here because when you asked this to me, I was like, oh, neat idea. And then I started thinking about it. Basically, Warner Brothers and Disney have like a standing weekly meeting where this is the topic. It's like, this is a well-tread topic. And we have a lot of reboots because of it. So you gotta dig deep. Like, if you want to find something, I was going through, I was like, oh, what about Spawn? Yeah, they're doing that. What about, Blade? Yeah, they were doing that. What about, 8 more things? And I'm like, oh gosh, well, there's too many things. I did think of a couple eventually. Let's
touch on what you just said real quick. So
sure.
So Spawn had a movie, and I think it was 97, with Michael J. White playing Spawn, who also played who would become James Rhodes, who become War Machine in the first Iron Man film before Robert Downey Jr. had him replaced because Don Cheadle is his friend because he did a movie back in the day.
I think that was Terrence Howard you're thinking of.
Was it really Terrence Howard?
That was Terrence Howard.
Oh,
racist!
Right. I am so sorry.
Oh,
no, here's the thing. I'm a Terrence Howard fan until I watched Empire, and I'm still a fan, but the melodrama in Empire did not make sense to me in the way it was portrayed. His character was so unemotional. Michael J. White, however, has this sneer, and he looks really angry when he plays like an anti-hero like Spawn. It was perfect. Terrence Howard also can carry that role usually, but Empire spoiled me on him. So he's been on the brain. And that's why, sorry, Michael J. White. And sorry, Terrence Howard, because I actually think you were a fantastic James Rhodes. You looked the part, you were perfect, and I was really sad. Not that Don Cheadle's not a fine actor, but there was no reason to have him replaced. Anyway, other than some sort of nepotism. But I just want to touch on, these are all theoretical because it is in pre-production, and the Spawn reboot film has been in works since 1997 when the first film came out. Todd McFarlane's original plan was to have the original Spawn film be PG-13, which it was, so lots of people could get into it. And then the sequel would be an R-rated film centering around Billy Kincaid, the child-killing ice cream man murderer from the comic books, and also from the HBO series. So that would be sort of the entryway. And then by the time the sequel came out, the kids would be old enough to see the R-rated film. Well, I don't think they intended it to be 1,000 years in the future. We're going on how many years? 23 years since the first film.
So there is recent advances in that.
There is. Supposedly, they have locked down Jeremy Renner and Jamie Foxx, who Jamie Foxx, of course, we just love here at Colton Classic Podcast. And Jeremy Renner, people will know as Hawkeye from the Avengers film. So that's very interesting. It's very possible. I'm sure it will happen at some point. McFarlane is strong still. McFarlane Toys are strong. Image is doing fine. There's no reason to assume we won't get one. But that's the backstory on that. And then, of course, you also mentioned Blade. Marvel, aka Disney Holdings, does have Blade back, and they are planning on including him in some form or another. Who knows if we will see Wesley Snipes in. He's notoriously difficult to work with, and the reason why all the Blade films have had different directors. And although, interesting side note, if you watch the What We Do in the Shadows TV series, not the original mockumentary, but if you watch the TV series, which is quite excellent, Wesley Snipes does reprise the role of Blade in that nearing the end of the first season, I think, or maybe it's the end of the second season. I think it's the end of the second season, actually. But anyway, somewhere in there, or first season. Don't know. Don't remember, but it's in there. Take a look. Back to your point, Jeff. Those are all the editor's footnotes from Stan Lee. I just threw them in there.
Yeah, thank you, my man. That was good. Good sidebar. And
we're all out of time. Thank you guys so much.
So I went deep here. Nobody's going to think of this one, or nobody's going to come with this one. I want to see Silver Surfer. I want to see it in a trilogy, 3 films. I want to see the first one. I want to name it Norrin Rad. I want to hire Doug Jones doing live action, like no costume work for the first film. This is just the origin of the Silver Surfer.
Sort of like a Krypton, like we get to see his home planet.
It's like, it really is like the first one to be like a disaster movie almost. It's like, the sky is falling, their planet is being destroyed, and they're like kind of racing to survive and figure out how to save their people. Eventually they figure some things out, and they get an audience with Galactus, where Galactus offers Norrin Rad a way to save his people. And that's the first film. And then we go to like the downfall. And this is why I think this character is actually interesting. I don't think it's been done well. He literally trades saving his planet to then essentially go and commit genocide on just planet after planet. That is a tortured existence. That is a horrible, tortured character. And I think that if you really dug in there, and I think modern audiences are ready to go for that type of ride, that's a downfall that I think is quite compelling. And then, obviously the third movie would be, a conclusion to that. And, finally he maybe can get an upper hand on Galactus. Maybe even just the way it's done in the comics, comes to Earth, meets some super powered friends, and is able to get the better. So technically he's actually he just kind of like abandons Galactus, and then like Galactus locks him on Earth in the comic series. I'd rather see the way that they did it in the Fantastic Four, though, that I don't think did the Silver Surfer any justice. But that way where, they come together and they defeat Galactus would be kind of where I would go with that.
So I think I love this idea. I am a huge Silver Surfer fan. Tad, I know you're also a big Silver Surfer fan. The only time we've seen Silver Surfer in the films is with the 2007's Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, which is the sequel to the Tim Story Fantastic Four film. I personally am a big fan of these. I think that they captured the sort of joy and tragedy of the Fantastic Four series quite well. And I was sad to see them rebooted, although we'll talk about the ill-fated
Lord.
reboot after that at some point. I think it definitely deserves discussion, but I really like that. And what's Rise of the Silver Surfer did get right is the look. I think we can all agree of the Silver Surfer.
He looks
was
badass.
phenomenal.
Aesthetically, Silver Surfer, I think, is my favorite comic book hero.
It's
He
absolutely
just looks
fantastic.
cool. He's just so cool looking.
He is.
Yeah.
And the idea that he like you said, his is a tortured existence. He is causing the death of millions, essentially billions most likely, of life forms across the cosmos, simply to essentially save his wife, right? Like that's really, to save his home planet. That's the only reason. And Galactus is, of course, his excuse is, I am a force of nature. I have no, like, instead of Thanos is sort of like, I'm going to take the moral high ground and do what needs to be done to improve the cosmos. Galactus is like, I'm no different than a fish eating a worm. Like this is how I survive and this is what I do. And if I don't do it, then I will die. So it is ridiculous to assume that I'm not going to do it, which it's a strong argument, actually. And in the Rise of Silver Surfer film, they didn't make him a giant person, which he is in the comics. They essentially had him as sort of this almost nematode-esque force of particles and things that devoured planets. And they did do a glimpse of, like, they sort of coalesce into his classic helmet sort of formation in the end. I actually thought, if you're not going to do the Galactus as a big person, it was an interesting touch. But it's sort of, as you said,
I think there's a lot of depth there. That's why I said I don't think, like, they didn't really get into the tortured existence of what a Silver Surfer really is.
And I don't know what the excuse is. It seems to be that producers and filmmakers seem to think that Silver Surfer cannot by himself hold a film. And I think your point is totally true, is why it's ridiculous. He has more character conflict and potential for development and stories than just about anyone else. Like, I actually think it would be quite incredible to have, like, an HBO Max series. Obviously we won't, because HBO Max is a Warner Brothers production, and Disney's probably not going to sell that way. But okay, fine, a Disney Plus, that's great. We've seen what they can do, especially with their active background animation stuff. They've been working with The Mandalorian. They actually are perfectly set to do a really beautiful job on a Silver Surfer. I'd love it. There was a Silver Surfer cartoon in '98. I think it only lasted for one season. So there's that, but good choice. I approve. You win the first round of Colton Classic Podcast minisode.
Point one, Jeffrey.
All right. Now we're going to move on to Mandy. Mandy, who's the comic character or characters that you think should be rebooted and why?
Oh man, so I am not a huge comic book fan,
and we're on to Tad. No,
yeah. But so I was thinking about this, like, what would I like to see? And Blade. I've talked about Blade in previous episodes. I would love to see that again if it is actually going to happen. I'm down for it. Then I was thinking about other movies, maybe not exactly comic books, but books. I'm a big fan of, like, books made into movies. The Dune series, I am lamenting that the new Dune movie has not been released yet, which was supposed to come out in 2020. So I would love to see that rebooted and actually happen. It's coming. It's happening. So that's kind of like, that doesn't count as an answer either. Then I was thinking, like, what shows or kind of jokey comic booky-esque things that I liked 20 years ago, what I would love to see redone again. The first one would be, like, the Homestar Runner web series that they did. I would love to see that rebooted with current technology, jokes, memes, like everything. I would
love to see that as a / real life, like Roger Rabbit series every week. I think we could do amazing things with that.
That could be very good. And then kind of as a companion to that, which has a lot of comic book and video game and, like, kind of nerd culture stuff in it, Reboot of Reboot. I don't know if anybody saw
I
that Canadian
loved
TV show.
Reboot, the early 3D animated series,
Was
which
like
in and of
one of the
itself,
very, very first
it had
computer
an
animated
interesting
shows.
soft reboot as well within the series, where it became
Yeah.
a little darker, and the lead character
Oh
came
yeah.
back after a disappearance with
Mhm.
dreadlocks, and it's very
Mhm.
interesting. I highly
Yeah, I don't know if it's
recommend
like
it.
second or third season. I have all of it on VHS, which I can't watch because I don't
Excellent.
have a VHS player anymore. But I had it all. Like a friend of mine in college, like painstakingly pieced it together on 3 separate tapes, like from television when it was like on what was it? Comic something or other. What was that TV show that just played cartoons? Cartoon Network. That
Cartoon
one.
Network.
That one. The one that played
Mhm.
cartoons. Yeah. And yeah, they had like I think it was like 2 seasons of like real kid stuff, and then the 3rd season got pretty dark because it got picked up by Cartoon Network, I think, and then
That is correct.
they were able to kind of like
I
do
think it
stuff
was
that wasn't
Toonami
for
was actually running that
yeah
final season.
yeah it wasn't just like kid TV anymore. That they had a Silver Surfer character on there, which was very cool.
They did.
And a lot of other nods to other comic book and gaming characters and storylines. I thought they did well, so I would love to see that happen again. And then, but as far as like straight up movies from comic books that I absolutely loved, and we'll probably talk about this movie again, is the original Crow. I would love to see that redone. There is a lot of like kind of lore and a lot of like heavy stuff about Brandon Lee dying as a result of acting in this film that might have to be dealt with to do like a real reboot of this.
And
But
the
I
first
would
one
love,
is, of course, by Alex Proyas, who is a great director and did Will Smith and iRobot, and even though that's a radical departure from the Asimov story, which many people are upset about. But I think you're onto something. The Crow, and I'm sure that we will get a reboot at some point. It's from the James O'Barr comic, which was sort of the a beautiful a beautifully gritty and dark and tragic tale of revenge. I think today it would be made, but it would also get skewered for being a bit of a fridge situation where his girlfriend is raped and murdered, and he's also murdered, and he comes back as revenge. And there's Native American overtones. I would adore seeing it actually helmed by Native American filmmakers and actually moving it to what some of the comics did on our reservation or something. That would add this really beautiful new twist. Also, I think it would have the potential to be one of those soft reboots where it doesn't retcon the original. It's just another story in the universe. There were, of course, I believe 3 sequels to The Crow. City of Angels was the second one, Wicked Prayer, and then Salvation in 2000 with Kirsten Dunst.
And a TV series.
First fucking franchise.
There was a TV series as well.
But yeah, I just remember the first one being like formative, I guess, or like it being like a real kind of milestone or marker of my youth.
Every goth kid wanted to dress like the Crow. They wanted to wrap themselves in electrical tape and pleather. And I was one of them. I wanted it too. And then you find out that's actually expensive and hot. And,
it's a little sweaty.
So my perspective on this is so we have all these things going back to the 80s. Like 80s have had like a huge resurgence. The 90s didn't have as much of an aesthetic, but like I think the Crow, it really is 90s. Like it is one of the few things that really is like, whoa, that's 90s.
Well,
the soundtrack.
Really
The soundtrack. So like this was not only one of my favorite movies, which I would stop in at the video store every single week to try and rent. And I remember someone had it out and like lost it or something, and they finally like ordered another copy just so I could rent it every week. But like the soundtrack was like my favorite CD for probably like 10 years.
It is a great soundtrack.
It's amazing.
I think and also interesting, the Blade 2 soundtrack for hip hop is a phenomenal soundtrack as well. And Crow, the sequel actually also has a pretty good soundtrack, much in my opinion better than the film. But interestingly, the Crow I think you're on something. If the aesthetic wasn't just 90s, it was 90s, but it was so iconic to the point that it informed all of the early 2000s films. I mean,
Mhm.
to assume that the Matrix and the Wachowski sisters' vision of the Matrix did not heavily, stand on the shoulders of Brandon Lee's version of The Crow is saying something else. And I want to throw too, I actually have a rare feature-length student film version of The Crow that stands closer to the comic book, which we will absolutely touch on Cult and Classic podcast. And by the way, listeners, if you want that sooner rather than later, write in Cult and Classic podcast at gmail.com. So, and I also want to mention Blade. Blade is officially being redone by Marvel, and it's in also pre-production. It's starring Mahershala Ali. I am probably butchering his name, but he played Cottonmouth in the Luke Cage Netflix series, and he played Juan in Moonlight in 2016. Very talented actor, and I think
he's pretty amazing.
I think he's going to be a phenomenal Blade. I mean, it's hard to imagine Wesley Snipes not being Blade because his physicality was perfect for what the character sort of had. But I'm really interested to see what they do with it, because if you go back and read the Tomb of Dracula comics in the 80s and stuff that had Blade and the Blade series, he is so insanely 80s that it'd be kind of fun to work that in again. But we'll see what happens and we'll see what they do. But great call. Love it. All right. We're on to you, Tad. Tad, what characters would you like to see rebooted from the comic?
Well, we all know what he's going to say, right?
Are you sure?
I actually don't.
Like,
Wait,
1, 2,
really?
3.
You're not going to say the thing?
You're not going to say it?
You're not going to say the thing?
Really? You think that Fantastic Four hasn't been rebooted enough fucking times already?
Well,
no,
that's
not what I was thinking.
It is getting rebooted since Disney has the ability.
So I'm going to take the different perspective on here and say, honestly, we're already rebooting stuff too much. As in, when you start rebooting as much as we're doing it right now, it means people are fucking out of ideas. I still have two characters that I want to see before I start worrying about the fucking reboot train. One being She-Hulk and two being Moon Knight.
Well, they're both being done on
They're
Disney
both being
Plus.
done, but I don't hear jack shit out of it. And I honestly think that how they do Moon Knight is going to make or break me for how they do my interest in the rest of it coming up. Because
it'll be interesting because the comics are decidedly dark and violent, and not that Disney Plus hasn't shown that it can have edgy material, but it strikes me very much as a Netflix or HBO Max style show, because I mean, the blood, the death, it's very much. I look forward to it, but I also sort of dread the idea that they're going to add a lot of levity to it, as they do with their comic properties, because it was kind of the charm of Moon Knight, was partly its ugly anti-hero darkness.
Yeah, and opposite from the Punisher, because while the Punisher does definitely touch on mental illness, the idea of a superhero that questionably may have severe schizophrenia is something that I haven't really seen yet, and I'm waiting to see, because the comics did it so well. Because they still, even to this day, the writers still pull that card where you never really know if he's the Fist of Khonshu or if he's just fucking insane. And that's the best part.
Well, and I think it's interesting because it leads for a lot of tie-ins that make sense in the Marvel universe right now, in the film and TV universe, such as Darkhawk and Shang-Chi. We know the Shang-Chi martial arts master movie is coming out. I guess I'm also a little reticent that Mark Spector, again, Moon Knight, is being played by Oscar Isaac, who played Poe in the Rise of Skywalker series. And I'm not saying, I think it's fantastic that they are having a person of color. He's from Latinx descent. I believe one of his parents is Guatemalan and one is Cuban. But my beef with Oscar Isaac was his sort of slamming Disney's Rise of Skywalker trilogy for its use of him and its portrayal. Yet I always get sensitive on that when you've benefited from it so extremely, yet you still, to be crass, feel it's okay to shit on it. I think Robert Pattinson handled it best with the Twilight series, where somebody asked, "Are you sad it's over?" And he said, for them, meaning the fans, he's like, I'm not saying that, I'm not going to say it's that I hated it or anything. It did a lot for me, and I'm glad people enjoyed it, but no, I did not think they were fantastic films. That's valid. But I think we all remember Spider-Man 3 before it launched. We remember Kirsten Dunst shitting on the whole series on was it Letterman, or it was, I can't remember which talk show it was who was hosting at the time, and it really sort of slapped her career back, because studios don't like to hear that. You kill ticket sales. You're also, if you're Ray Fisher and you worked for Warner Brothers, who I am a huge DC fan, I always have been, but Warner Brothers and DC has a terrible history of having inappropriate behavior from their executives. And I 100%, we here at Colton Classic Podcast support Ray Fisher, and I believe it. And his concerns and his frustrations have been essentially confirmed by his other co-stars. So there's no question about it. Unless you're in that case when you've been wronged and it's a matter of record and it should be dealt with in a way that it's not being dealt with, then I don't think it's your place to shit on the movie, at least not in the like immediate aftermath of the film. Move on with your life. Be grateful that you have it. I think all of us on this panel have had some opportunity that's been big, like, I don't know, co-starring in the next generation of Star Wars films, and it's been dashed from our hands. Okay, that's something most of us can identify with on some level. And to have someone who gets it and then, poo-poos the whole thing, and it's like, well, I'm like, you could not have written it better, Oscar Isaac. Maybe time will tell, and you will have a fantastic Academy Award-winning script, and I will be proven wrong. And I look forward to that day. I hope that happens for you. But do not tell me your character was bad in the series. I agree. But the biggest problem is you didn't have to be in that series. There were already too many characters. If you didn't want to be in the series, by all means, don't be in the series.
Yeah, leave the shitting of movies to me. Thank you very much. That's
right.
My job.
And I'm to be honest, I'm a little surprised that Disney then was like, yes, please be in this. And I think it's a tribute to the fans who liked him and wanted his sort of obstinate take on a Han Solo character, that he actually is still working for Disney, because I certainly, John Boyega's got other roles. He doesn't need Disney at this point, but I think Oscar Isaac does. I don't think that he had much to work with. So anyway.
I mean, didn't he also play Apocalypse in that terrible fucking X-Men movie? Now that we're bringing it back full circle.
X-Men Apocalypse, yes.
That movie, oh my God, I was dragged to that movie. And anytime it's a movie that doesn't say Days of Future Past in it, I go, no, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this at all.
Well, and the thing is that I think for X-Men fans of Claremont, of Claremont's X-Men, which is essentially any X-Men fan, Apocalypse is, to me, one of the greatest villains the X-Men ever had. And so when you don't have him, he's a tough character to tackle in a way, but I kind of feel like you can do it exactly like the comics and make him look essentially exactly like the comics. We've seen it because we've seen the snippets of Zack Snyder's Darkseid. We've seen an entire trilogy or duology of films and a couple of cameos of James Brolin as Thanos. We've seen that this can be done and they can look comic accurate. And so the idea of reimagining in that way, and also let's blame Bryan Singer. I mean, we know he's a pedophile. He made a fantastic first couple X-Men movies, and Superman Returns had its merits, but guess what? Don't give him a job anymore. He's a pedophile. He shouldn't be around children. He shouldn't be in a position of power. And also he's not nice to his cast.
No,
so
he's got a long history of being pretty terrible.
I don't know why this is my moment now to be irritated at certain
God
people
damn it,
in Hollywood.
Nathan.
But hey, it's me and it's my podcast. What are you gonna do? You're gonna listen to another Cult and Classic podcast? Please don't. But yeah, no, I think that I think you have something. I mean, I think a lot of people get frustrated with reboots, especially when they're done to basically extend contracts, like the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, which who knows what they're doing with Spider-Man 3, by the way,
I agree with that one. Just give me a decade in between these bloody things. Like, put Batman to nap for a decade, put Spider-Man to bed for a decade, and then reboot them. Like, I understand that like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man are like the three most popular, but give us a little break in between.
See, that was gonna lead into what I was saying, which is basically, haha, the entire DC universe was my choice. Lol. Turns out that's all they're fucking doing now is rebooting themselves because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And I could say the same thing for certain characters with Marvel. I mean, I figured that Jeff was going to peg me for, you're just going to talk about Ghost Rider.
I thought you were going to talk about Ghost Rider. I thought it was a very
No,
strong
I thought
possibility.
I actually think there's a good idea here. I think
I
we
thought he was
need
gonna
a
copy
live
that.
action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in costume, like actually like actors on
Well,
set.
We had that, and it's never going to be better than the original. It's not going to fucking
It's
happen.
true. I mean, we know. So here's what we know. We know that Seth Rogen is working with Nickelodeon on the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle films.
Is he? There's so many things. The answers.
I mean, so here's the thing. I'm going to give him a chance. I mean, if you would all give Michael Bay a chance, for God's sakes, why would you give Seth Rogen a chance? So I'm fine. We'll give it a shot. Now, I also want to touch on the fact that we talked about this. I don't think we talked about this on the air. I think this is one of those after hours conversations we had, Tad. But the rumor mill is saying that Marvel is trying to get Nicolas Cage to come back as Ghost Rider, as Johnny Blaze. Now, I am absolutely in favor of that. I think he's a fantastic Johnny Blaze. Give him something to work with. It could be a really interesting thing to lead into maybe a Danny Ketch story when you have the old, bedraggled, drunk Johnny Blaze. It seems, I think a Ghost Rider TV series on Netflix would have been phenomenal. And I'm curious to see if Disney Plus tries it. I think their biggest concern is the special effects and the stories, because the stories of the Ghost Rider comics typically dealt so heavily with other elements of the Marvel universe. It was not easily standaloneable, if that is a term, which it is not. So
either you have to deal with other aspects of the universe, or you have to deal with heavy themes, and that requires a very special writing and directing team. I mean, if I had an ideal Ghost Rider story at this point, it would be starting off with Johnny Blaze in hell, play off Nick Cage's ability to really chew the scenery and be as nuts as possible. I can't remember the name of the series. What's my favorite Ghost Rider story? The one where he's literally riding the bike towards the portal to get out of hell, and that's his punishment, is he always almost makes it and he's torn apart right at the end.
Wasn't that the Garth Ennis revisit?
Yes, start there. Start where he's in hell. It's like you got the demon, you did your thing. Now guess what? Now you're paying for it, and start him there, and it's start off like an Ant-Man and Wasp thing where it's like he's stuck in hell. How the hell's he gonna get out?
Well, and you could build a really cute little universe where he could occasionally interact outside of it, but you wouldn't have to, but it would take some doing. Like you'd bring in Danny Ketch and you'd have parallel storylines, and then you would have Vengeance show up, however the hell you want him to look nowadays. So you would have options, but it would be I think that Disney would have to work on the supernatural angle to make it effective without the drug use or the slums, the things that sort of were always in the Ghost Rider comic books, the inherent biker gang situation kind of vibe. I think that they can do it. Absolutely. I do think that it's probably a little more likely that they're going to bring in, and I forget the character's name, I'm terrible, but the Hispanic Ghost Rider, the kid who has the car. Thank you, Rodriguez. I think that they only chose the most common Hollywood last name. But hey, it's a great name, Robert Rodriguez. We love you. Jump on our show. I think that maybe it's more likely that instead of Danny Ketch, we would get him, and then Johnny Blaze would somehow be involved, maybe as a mentor figure, which would be really messed up. But I think that could happen. I think that it fits more with Disney's intent. But again, I would just love to see Nicolas Cage as Ghost Rider do stuff
with a competent director.
Oh yeah, let's not hope too hard. Yeah, no. So that's good. And I think, Jeff, did you say The Thing? Is that what you were going to say? You thought the Tad was going to talk about The Thing?
No. I was thinking just like we've had a lot of animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they're man. I want like a real, like the ones from the 90s. It's like almost 30 years. Give us something similar to that.
Now I am gonna say that the Ninja Turtles 3D animated series that Nickelodeon did first when they got the rights from Kevin Eastman is actually pretty fantastic. I highly recommend watching it through. I was sad when they ended it for the current reboot.
Which one? Because there's so many.
There's 4, and then there's the Next Mutations. Calm down. Actually, there's 5 if you count the pilot for the Japanese animated series where they turn into a giant robot. That's pretty wild.
Jesus Christ. It sounds like a meme. That actually happened?
We could cover it on this podcast. I have a copy right behind me here. But
of course.
So interestingly, it's pretty good because it really did a nice job of, I think it was 2004. Is that when that one started? I can't remember. But it's a great blend of the comic books with the sort of levity of the original 80s cartoon. So it's a nice
I think I do know that series. Yeah.
It's a pretty good series, I have to
The
say.
one from
I really
the
enjoy
early
that.
2000s,
And they bring in
yeah.
Fugitoid and a bunch of characters from the comics that never made it elsewhere. It's fun stuff. Now the current Rise of the Turtles, Rise of the Ninja Turtles, I mean, they've tried to Teen Titan Go it, and that's never been my favorite option. Not that I hate it. Anything that we get is great at this point, but you know, that's what it is. Now, I want to talk about The Thing, though, because you made me think of The Thing and Fantastic Four. We know that Disney is doing something with the Fantastic Four. But The Thing, I actually think, is one of the few characters that they kind of got right a few times. I think The Thing from the Tim story is great. He was the Thing. I think that the Thing from Roger Corman's never officially released Fantastic Four, where they were doing it just to fulfill a contractual obligation. Man, that sucked for those actors. I think that was an adequate, vision. And then the 2005 was an interesting interpretation. Interesting. But that leads into my choice for characters that need a reboot desperately, and that is Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom,
Yes.
as has been said, there have been multiple Fantastic Four films and cartoons, and Dr. Doom has never quite been 100% nailed, I believe. First things first, put him in the costume and keep him there. Put him in the costume and keep him there. Why do you do this thing where we see their face? We don't need to see their face. If the comics don't have them their face, I don't want to see their face. Stallone and Judge Dredd, although I still enjoy that movie quite a bit. Carl Urban was willing to keep that mask on.
You know it. It's always been a focus group thing where they don't think people can relate to the character if they can't see their face, and that's the whole point. You're not supposed to relate to Doom.
Right. And so here's the thing that I think is interesting, is that Doom has a fantastic amount of material that could actually carry his own series. I would love to see an adult-oriented Doom story that is just about Doom and occasionally had heroes come in. Wow, what a phenomenal series. But more than that, I would like to see Doom in Black Panther 2. Because I think Doom, they did it. Marvel did a great thing in the comics where they really worked to start to bring Doom into other series outside of Fantastic Four, because he's, of course, their iconic villain. And it works, especially because in Black Panther, it's, about the leader of Wakanda, of a sovereign nation. And Doom is the ruler of, is it Latveria? Is that?
Latveria, yeah.
Latveria, yes, very close to Latvia, but not. And he is the iron-fisted ruler of this despotic regime in this country. And the fact that you have two leaders challenging each other, not just of factions, but of countries, essentially, is a really interesting mix. And Marvel did a good job. And then you have all the side stories of Doom having different bots and Doom bots and things like that roaming around. Just really cool character. And you also have, beyond the look and sort of the interest of his nature of ruling a country, you also have the fact that his powers come not just from technology, but from supernatural forces. You get that fun blend, which some people don't like. My wife hates blending science and magic. I think it's totally valid, and I think it can be done well. I also think it can be done horribly, but I think that that's okay if you do it right. I think Doom does it right. It's just a hint of the occult, and it's never over-explained, but it also is technology, and you can kind of really mix the two. And that's why he worked as a foil to you know, Dr. Richard, Mr. Fantastic in the Fantastic Four, because he was a brilliant scientist, and Dr. Doom was sort of a jack of all trades, master of a few, I guess. But anyway, he's the hero I would like to see rebooted. If we can't have a live action series, hey, give us a Doom animated series. That'd be fine. Even give us a Doom animated film. Marvel hasn't been successful with their animated film outings like DC has, but something. I mean, a Books of Doom, you know, translation film would be fantastic. Well, I sort of petered us out there, but we really talked around a lot of things. There's been a lot of comic movies coming out. Of course, we have comic adjacent video game movies, like we have the new Mortal Kombat coming out. Those are all things we can talk about, but these characters are ones that we need to reboot. I also want to argue just one little bit as we approach this end with Jeff and Tad here, because I think part of the reason why, as a comic book lover, I don't mind having lots of iterations of characters. The comics do that essentially all the time. I will say I get tired of seeing the same story over and over again. So while I'm totally okay with seeing 6 different Batman, or Batmen, I guess you would say, I don't want them to be telling the same story over and over again. And that's something that Sony and Disney's Marvel have done, which drives me bonkers. I don't want to see it over and over again.
We know Batman's origin story.
Right. We know Spider-Man's origin story. Now, I will say the Tom Holland Spider-Man, I actually really enjoy this series so far. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see how they're able to work Venom in. I really want them to, because I think he can be done right. And of course, Tom Hardy, given a better script and better direction. I think Andy Serkis, who's helming Venom 2, is really capable of that. And Woody Harrelson as Cassidy, Carnage is going to be really great. But I think that we're done seeing these origins. I don't want to see him again. Do not reboot Captain America. I don't think they will. I think Falcon will become Captain America as in the comics for a while, but who knows what's going to happen. But I don't want to see those origins again. I don't want to. You already nailed it for our generation. Wait, do other stories. You have plenty. You have decades and decades of materials to pull from. Just do something new. And also, as much as flack as I give Warner Brothers for being directionless, which I think has been the case, Tad, I still think it's the case with their cinematic universe. I will give them credit for doing a good job of doing a series that may reinvigorate yet not retcon the past films. We've talked about this, how Ghost Rider and Ghost Rider Spirits of Vengeance, both with Nicolas Cage, both from was it Sony or Fox? I think it was Sony, right?
That was Fox.
Fox. Okay. Well, anyway, they didn't have to change the backstory in the openings, but they do. Hulk did it as the Incredible Hulk did it as well. There was no reason to do that. Let people who remember the original see this as a sequel. There's no reason to wipe the slate. Birds of Prey did a great job of it. You don't see Jared Leto as Joker, but you could see it as a brand new series or as a continuation. It doesn't have to retcon everything.
We had the same conversation offline essentially about Punisher because Warzone did the exact same fucking thing.
It did. No reason whatsoever. And it's stupid. It's sort of, I think the idea is they're like, oh, well, some fanboys are bitching, so we're going to essentially apologize by retconning this with a couple of lines in the opening or a montage. And it's dumb. It doesn't need to happen. If you're reading the comic books, the monthly series, and you didn't like the last arc, well, the new arc probably gonna have a different writer anyway, or wait until there's a different writer, or switch over to another title with the character. There's a million of them for the most part. In most of the big cases, you don't have to retcon it. And it drives me bonkers.
It's also the same problem that you'd have if it's a long story. Like, for instance, one of my dreams, it'll probably never fucking happen, but I would love to see a live action BattleTech TV series take place. But everyone would assume that they'd want to do it in the 30,000s. And I'd be like, no, do the American Civil War. That thing's insane. And you'd have to at least do a montage in the beginning to explain what the fuck is even going on. And it would take a while because the BattleTech cartoon did it. They had no problem explaining, oh, well, some crazy shit happened over the past few hundred years and, well, whatever, we're shooting each other now.
Well, Interesting take. I think BattleTech, it's sort of like, I think before we get a BattleTech, we're going to get a Warhammer TV show.
Probably.
Because and the reason
God.
it's they both have the same problem, and Warhammer is a little more well known, which is the amount of special effects and background story is incredible and super deep. We're running long. I want to say one more thing. I didn't say a reboot of Howard the Duck because I just want Howard the Duck.
I knew that was
coming.
I don't
need a reboot. People who know me know that Howard the Duck is my favorite comic of all time. Writer Steve Gerber did such a brilliant job. If you think that he's a joke and you don't really understand him, I mean, it's kind of a joke, but read the original. Marvel has re-released the Steve Gerber Howard the Ducks, the originals, not the Max series, although that's fun too, but go back and read them. They are truly brilliant, and you have amazing artists like Gene Coleman and things who did, if fantasy worlds. Like, this is top-notch stuff. There's a reason that they made a movie about him in the 80s. George Lucas was like, yes, do this, because his material is brilliant. It's existential. There are entire issues that are essentially just short stories where Steve Gerber, as the writer, is talking to Howard the Duck and having this existential crisis about life. Truly awesome stuff. He runs for president. There's an evil sofa. It's madness and brilliance. And that's why James Gunn continues to have little snippets of Howard the Duck in the Guardians of the Galaxy films and elsewhere, because he recognizes the genius of this and this character. And James Gunn fronting a Howard the Duck movie where he's just trying to make it with Beverly at a minimum wage job, it'd be absolute gorgeous brilliance. That it's a dream. If anybody wants to give me money, Marvel, I'm here. I got some good ideas. Disney, hire me up. I could take this to new heights with Howard the Duck. Let's fly. Let's fly in V formation to success.
I guarantee someone could hand this team about $50 million. We could still do a better job than most Marvel films in the early 2000s at least, which is not exactly a high bar.
That's true. But we've got a lot to look forward to with Thor, Love and Thunder, and Black Panther 2 and Spider-Man 3, all sorts of wonderful things. But we're going to wrap this up because I could talk forever about comics, and I know you guys could too. Thank you guys so much for listening, listeners. We are excited to be with you every week, and there's a lot to look forward to this year from Colton Classic Podcast. Follow us at Colton Classic Podcast on Instagram. To play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. And I want to also say, write to us, give us your suggestions, your recommendations. If you have movies we want to talk about or a genre, send us emails at coltonclassicpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Colton Classic Podcast and Facebook.com/Colton Classic Podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at Nate Wyckoff. Thank you guys so much from the bottom of my Gen Xer heart. I am grateful for you. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Colton Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit coltonclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.